Welcome back to another session learning corporate AWS landing zone. And I hope you have gone through all my previous videos where we set up the corporate landing zone, control tower organization, how we integrated the identity center with Azure. Now, in this video, we would specifically look at security, right? Security of the AWS multi-account structure that we have set up so far. So quick recap, right? This is the current set of accounts that we have: CloudTrail admin, config aggregator, and learn corporate AWS, which is actually our management account, right? So let's quickly draw what we have created so far, right? So we have a couple of accounts here, right? So we got CloudTrail admin, and we have config aggregator, all right? And the management account, right? I would like to call it learn corporate just because it's named like that. You can always change your name of the account as well. And this is, for simplicity, I'll just mark it as the management account of our organization, right? This is the topmost account, most important. It's very important to secure this account, right? We can't let hackers hack into this account at all, right? Because once the security breaches on the management account, it's very difficult to recover it back, right? Unless you have strong alerting and monitoring set up on the management account, you would not know, right? The hacker would just get in, assume into every account, and get things done, right? So, as of today, if you remember, we have initially created the root user credentials. What exactly is root user? A lot of people in their AWS journey, they don't understand what is a root credential versus what is an IAM user versus what is a federated user. As of today, we are using federated user, and our federation is through Identity Center and Azure, right? So we federate our authenticated users into AWS by authenticating against our identity sitting on Azure. All right, what that means is that is a federated login. Now, let me just note it down here as well. So we got identity center, right? So so that's the way you depict your identity center. So my users can log in from here, right? So my users would log in from here. This is all the Azure authentication that happens behind the scenes, right? We already went through in detail. If you have not gone through the video, do go through it. It's very good refresher for your IAM, security, federation, SAML. So those kind of concepts are covered in those videos. Um, so that's the flow as of today, right? And this identity center sits inside the management account, and you can further connect to this accounts, right? All right, so that's the setup. Now there is something called as a user, a root user as well, right? So this is federated users, all right? That is what you're supposed to use in your corporate environment. And there is something called as root. I won't mark it as multiple people because I want to make sure that this root user is supposed to be a super secure user. It's going to be a singular. I would want to keep it as a singular user, all right? So this is your root user. Okay, so quick concept about root user, right? Whenever you create an AWS account, there's always going to be a root user credential that will be assigned, and that will be treated as your initial credential to log into that account. Now, if you're creating your account through Account Factory, the control tower organization, then you don't necessarily explicitly create a root user, but internally, whenever you give an email ID to member account, that email ID is exactly your root user. For example, the management account right now is Learn Corporate AWS, which means the email associated to the Learn Corporate AWS account is the root user, which is corporate AWS landing zone at gmail.com. Right? That's a primary email address associated with the management account, which means I can reset the password for the root user anytime by resetting the password through email validation, right? So I'll just have to send an OTP to my email and I can recover the password, which means whoever gets access to my email, right, has the capability to get into the management account, which means any email box that you assign to the management account in your corporate setup, make sure you discuss with your security teams and ensure proper security guardrails on your email box as well. All right, best practice, make sure you do not remember your passwords on the management account. It's the best practice to forget the password. That's the best practice. Now, you could also keep that in a vault, but you have to make sure your vault has a secure best practice that you follow. It should not be a vault treated as a non-production environment. You could save it, but I always recommend forgetting your password, destroying your password, so that when you require to log in into root, and we will go through a couple of actions where you need root users, right? We will go through the documentation for that. But in an ideal scenario, there's a very rare chance that you would be using root credentials in your day-to-day routine task, which means if you're working as of today on a daily task, hopefully you're not using a root user, because that's the most powerful user which you're not supposed to use on a daily basis. All right, so that's pretty much the root user credential I wanted to focus on. So this is your root user, right? Let me just put this in a group. All right, so that's your root user. You can still log in, right? And here you're not going to the identity center, right? Because this is a local AWS login, all right? Now there's something called as IAM user as well. I just want to make it very clear that these three are different ways you can get in to your AWS account, right? An IAM user will give you credentials through access keys and whatnot, right? So let's mark it and make it very clear, because I have been in the AWS market for so long to understand that a lot of engineers do not understand the differences between federated users, root user, IAM user. IAM user and the root user, they're mostly local to AWS account, right? And then there is IAM role, but IAM role is used by federated users, right? So federated users assume into an IAM role to get access to the AWS account. So this is the IAM identity center, right? All right, this is the root user. And in this video, continuing from here, we are going to focus on the protection of the root user. This is nothing but a pair of username password, right? So if you have an email ID, to get into the management account, you would also have a password, right? On the day one, when you create an account, you get a username and password. Username is the email and password is what you create. And these are the most, I cannot emphasize much better than this, I would say, is to secure your root credential as much as possible. All right. Now, AWS has given certain ways to manage this, right? Now, quick follow-up question that comes to your mind is, in a multi-account setup, you would end up creating more workloads like config aggregator, like my VPC workload, right? Sitting in an application one account, application two account, right? And as and when I create more accounts, I would have more root credentials to protect. So in theory, when I have more accounts, I have more root credentials. Each account has its own root credential. How would I protect them at scale? That is what we are going to talk about today. And that is all about centralized management of root credential in a way where security teams would love you. Security teams would reward you when you go to them and say, I'm going to protect my root user for every AWS account. All right. So I hope this is clear. As of today, we have this setup, 3 accounts, and we will look at how to enable the root access management. All right. All right. Let's log into the management account from scratch, and we're supposed to go is find the IAM console. All right. And then a little near the account settings, you'll find root access management. All right, so that's pretty much where you have to land in and enable the centralized root access for your member accounts. It states you can delete root credentials for the member accounts and perform privileged actions from the management or delegated account. All right, the way it works is, like I said previously, every account has its own root credential. But when you create accounts through organization, you don't necessarily need the initial credential to log into that member account, because by the time you have set up organizations, set up control tower, and you have subsequent member account for your workloads, you are in a setup where you have your federated logins enabled. Now, in a there's a very low probability that you have a corporate setup and you don't have a federated login system. If you do have a federated login system, then you could opt in for the root access management. With improved security, you can delete the root user credentials for member accounts and eliminate the need for managing long-term root user credentials and associated multi-factor authentication devices. No credentials for the root, no management of MFA devices, right? That's pretty straightforward. But like I said, the topmost account, which is the management account, you cannot delete the credentials for those accounts. Why? Because you still need to have a credential, right? Although you don't remember, that's fine, but you can still reset your password as long as you have access to your mailbox. So in the setup of root access management, what you can do is you can delete all the credentials associated with your member accounts which are root user, right? Better compliance, you can prove to your security teams that there is no root credentials, right? There's non-existence of your audit and compliance need, proving your root user is secured across your member accounts. Total control, you'll have the control to block or allow root password recovery for passwordless member accounts, which means you get to choose whether the member accounts in your organization have the capability to log in as root or not. When you delete the credentials, you can still recover them by making sure that you enable password recovery. So we'll look at that shortly. Let's enable the root access management. You have few capabilities that you have to enable here: root credentials management and privileged root actions in the member account, right? So just go with the default, select both of them. All right, whenever there's a security service that you enable in AWS, AWS tries to give you a way to delegate another account from where you can manage the security, right? So in this case, you can manage centralized root access for all of your member account from a dedicated management account, right? Not the topmost management account, but in this case, the management account for centralized root access, which is ideally recommended. So for now, we'll just skip this. We can set up a delegated administrator account, but in that case, we'll have to create a new account and set the account ID, maybe for another day. So you come here, you click on enable, and then that's it. It's as easy as clicking a button. Root access management is enabled. You can now delete your root credentials for the member accounts from root access management page. The first thing that you do after you enable this setting is go to root access management console, and here is where you check your status of root credential for every member account, right? So like you see, so for example, CloudTrail admin, this was created as a part of the control tower provisioning, right? Which is why you don't see any root user credential, right? Config aggregator, not present, right? But what if I need to login as root. So I would take a privilege action on that member account, allow password recovery, and say allow. So what I just did is executed a privilege action on an underlying member account, stating that the member account can now reset the password to the email ID associated with that account. In this case, the CloudTrail admin. Now the status of root user credential shows as present. What is present? The console password, right? No access keys, no MFA devices, signing certificates. Again, if you see access keys enabled for any of these accounts for root credentials, that's a red flag. Make sure that you record it and report it to your security team if that happens, right? Ideally, you should be setting up monitoring, and I think in one of the follow-up recordings we will see how to set the monitoring on the root credentials, root monitoring, and how to do incident management. So this is a way you can allow password recovery for your member account, right? I can show you how to log into CloudTrail admin. So let's do that. Let me copy the email ID. All right. You have to make sure that you sign out from your existing session. Okay, this is the landing page for AWS login. Right here, you just click on sign in using root user email. As of today, I don't know the password because Control Tower created the account for me and the credentials were not present. But now I have enabled the password recovery because I need to log in. Otherwise, I won't be able to log in if that is disabled, right? So the step to reset your password is to make sure you go through the forget password workflow, right? So you put root user, which is your email associated with the member account. In this case, corporate AWS landing zone plus cloudtradeadmin at gmail.com. You say next, and then, well, you don't know the password, so you click on forget password. Make sure you key in all the captchas. All right. Now, this is the most important part. When you set up a corporate AWS environment, you have to work with your security team and ensure that there is proper guardrails on the mailbox. Now I will be looking into the email. All right, just gathering the password, email. All right, I have received a link to reset the password. So I'll just quickly show you the workflow here. So that's the link, and it's asking me to key in the new password. So I can key in the new password. And set a new password. Well, it doesn't allow an easy password, so make it a little complex. All right, now sign in. Again, sign in using the root user email because you're not password. Well, it doesn't allow an easy password, so make it a little complex. All right, now sign in. Again, sign in using the root user email because you're not logging in as an IAM user. In as an IAM user. Again, your email ID. sign in. All right, so this is a conditional check that AWS will take you through in most of the scenarios. It is not necessarily the MFA that you create, but it's a check that AWS implements whenever you log into your root account. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's very conditional. You don't know when AWS will confirm your identity through an email verification code. So it could happen anytime. For now, I'm running an incognito window, which is probably why it is checking with me if I'm the right person to log in as root. Okay, another email with the OTP, and it allows me to directly log in as the root, which is the most powerful account or user credential for the account CloudTrail admin, right? That's my member account. That's it. I am logged in as root. All right. Now, what I'll do is I will sign out and I'll show you how your root access credentials management work. So again, let's go back to the management account, root access management credential dashboard. Now go to CloudTrail admin, take a privileged action, and delete your user credential. Confirm. You can automate this process as well. There's an API call. If you're running Python, you can use Boto3 API calls to automatically delete your passwords, right? When you work in a multi-account structure with 500 plus accounts, you don't necessarily do this manually. You can have an automated procedure run on a daily basis to check if you have any root user credentials for a member account active, right? In an ideal scenario, you should not have a root user present in your environment or credential present in your environment for the member account for more than an hour. And that's just the highest security standards you can implement in the corporate setup. So we just got rid of the root credentials for this particular account. What that means is now the passwords which I have, I won't be able to use it to log in as root, which means the window that was provided to you to use your root user credentials is now complete, right? You don't have any more credentials to log in as root. So this could be a good security workflow in your corporate setup where your security team allows you a window of 2 hours with these security credentials, and you log in as root, you get the work done, and then at the end of the 2 hours the security team will ensure that these credentials are deleted either through an API call or manually log in and then delete these credentials, right? So just to confirm that there is no way to log back in, I will sign out and show you how the login looks like. All right, so we will log back in and try to attempt and log in. Sign in as root. All right, in the same password that I reset. Sign in. Your root user credentials are not valid, or the sign in as root is currently disabled for this account, which means I'm not keying in a wrong password. I'm only trying to log in and it states that it is currently disabled for this account, which means no root login. That means no one can even hack into your account as a root user. Problem solved. All right, coming back to our management account, quick recap. We went through the process of root access management, how to enable it, how to recover a password, how to delete a password, right? There are a couple of other important privileged actions that you can take, but let's read that offline and maybe take that for another session. But overall, your root access management procedure needs to be documented, needs to be vetted, and needs to be reviewed every 3 months at least with the security team if you have a complex corporate setup in your environment running production workloads. And specifically for compliance environments like PCI, PII, GDPR, you have to make sure that this process is documented, this process is vetted every 3 months. So let's look at the root access management real quick. What's the latest status? All of my root user credentials do not exist except for Learn Corporate AWS account, which is my management account. And again, you cannot delete your root user credentials. So you have to make sure if you know your password or if multiple team members know your password, they are logged in into a vault, right? If you think that people who are not supposed to know the password of the management account got access to the account somehow, you can always reset the password through a higher authority in your company and make sure passwords are forgotten or keep them secure in the vault with multi-factor authentication. Another thing to remember, the email associated with the management account needs to be protected with multiple guardrails because anyone having access to that email box can recover the password of the management account. Again, even if that happens, that's fine. You can still set up monitoring, multi-account monitoring. Maybe we'll take that in one of our future lessons. But end of the day, if someone logs in as a root, you should be able to create an at least a P2 incident in your ServiceNow or in your Jira or whichever incident management tool you're using, because that way it spreads awareness in your AWS team that someone is using the root user, right? And if that root user is legitimate, backed by a proper request, then you can ignore that, suppress that finding, and if it is not, then you probably have a problem. All right. With that, let's conclude this session. Thank you so much and keep growing, keep learning AWS.